But just 3 years later, Connie had to abandon his research station. The glacier had changed out of all recognition. Its previously smooth surface had been transformed into a crinkled, chaotic landscape of deep crevasses.
So is it dangerous then, where we're going?
Well, I would call it not dangerous with a helicopter, because we can land between the crevasses, but definitely danger if you actually walk around. And I don't think this is normal. All this was a smooth area. We were driving ski-doo on this upper part.
Yeah. Yeah, you wouldn't do that now.
No, definitely not.
It goes down quite a way, Connie.
I have long legs.
Connie realised this change in the glacier's appearance could only have been caused by one thing. It had speeded up. The dead glacier was no longer dead. And it wasn't alone. Many other glaciers around Greenland have also speeded up as temperatures have risen. These faster moving glaciers could have a significant effect on global sea level, but it was a process that had never been predicted.
We are surprised every year by a new process we see. A process we did not anticipate. A process that certainly has not been modelled.
The priority now is to understand these processes so they can be included in the models. So Connie is investigating the link between rising temperatures and the accelerating glaciers. He believes that warmer temperatures mean that where the glaciers reach the sea, they're producing many more icebergs than before in a process known as calving. To understand how this speeds up the glacier, I'm joining Connie in the birthplace of an iceberg, down a crevasse.
More to the right, yes. Fine, thanks. Yes, okay.
How far have I got to go? Whoa! Yeah!
Just push out.
Whoa!
Yes!
That was a bumpy landing.
Good.
Good.
Hey.
Hey, hey, hey!
Down it goes.
Wow.
Connie explains how increased calving can actually help make the glacier move faster.
So we're in a crevasse and eventually it's going to make its way down to the sea and calve off. How does that calving process drive the glacier too?
Or we can stay here a couple of weeks and then experience it ourselves, because it will happen along this line.
Right.
Where you have the crevasses and it moves towards the ocean, then it is floating on the ice, and that gets a weak point.
Yeah.
And that breaks off, and that is a major release of ice into the ocean.
And what does it mean for the glacier upstream then, these big icebergs breaking off?
When a big iceberg breaks off, more ice can move down. And if the ice moves faster, the ice gets thinner as well. And the thinner ice can break even faster.
In other words, it can become a chain reaction, with faster glaciers leading to thinner ice, which creates more icebergs and an even faster glacier. Nearby, scientists have for the first time filmed the whole front of a glacier breaking off. This speeded up footage shows how icebergs up to 1 kilometre across turn upside down as they break off into the sea. The work of Connie and other scientists is helping improve the models. Modelers can now factor in details that until recently they've been unable to include, details that may radically alter their predictions. It now seems that as global temperatures rise, Greenland is losing ice at an ever-increasing rate. The implications are serious. It means that sea level could rise much more quickly than the models have predicted up until now, threatening the homes of millions around the globe. But this isn't the only challenge the modellers face.
There's a fundamental process in the climate system which means that no model can predict the future with absolute certainty. It was discovered entirely by accident when the climate modeller took a shortcut and went off for a cup of coffee.
The year was 1961. A meteorologist called Edward Lorenz wanted to rerun an experiment on his simple climate model.
Thanks, man. Lovely. For the second run, instead of using numbers that ran up to 6 decimal places, he used numbers that had been rounded up to just 3 decimal places. And then he left the computer noisily chugging its way through the sums. Now, you wouldn't have thought that would have mattered. After all, rounding up the numbers hardly changed them. But it did. When he came back, Lorenz was astonished. Compared to the first run, this new version produced a completely different forecast. I mean, it was just plain weird. The numbers had hardly changed, and yet the result was transformed. Now, for a lesser scientist, he might have blamed his equipment or just dismissed the result as a fluke, but for Lorenz, this was a moment of revelation.
He concluded this wasn't a flaw in the model, but something intrinsic to the climate system. Tiny events could grow in significance over time, eventually having a huge impact. It led Lorenz to ask one of the most famous questions in science. Does the flap of a butterfly's wings in Brazil set off a tornado in Texas?
Lorenz's celebrated phrase means simply this: the tiny changes in the atmosphere triggered by the flapping of a butterfly's wings, changes so imperceptible that we can't hope to measure them, could still have a huge effect on the weather. He had discovered chaos.
It was an insight that would go on to revolutionise scientists' understanding of everything from irregular heartbeats to stock markets. And it explains why a weather forecast isn't always accurate, and why climate models give a range of predictions. But this doesn't mean models are useless, because the modelers have a way of dealing with chaos. Run the models again and again. While the results might vary, clear trends do emerge. And repeated runs confirm the general direction that climate change is taking us: a gradually warming world. That's worrying enough, but for scientists, chaos was also a wake-up call. It alerted them to a new possibility. They realised there could be instabilities hidden in the climate system which they still knew nothing about. It's a fear that's been proved absolutely right.
Something's been discovered in an entirely different branch of science. It's got some really unnerving implications. It's come from looking at what happened to the climate in the past.
The story begins with a series of intriguing discoveries almost 40 years ago. It would end with a scientific revolution and the realisation that global warming could deliver some very nasty surprises.
The first inkling of something amiss was in the 1960s with the discovery of some rather puzzling dead beetles. These beetles were found in soil that was over 11,000 years old, laid down at the end of a cold period called the Younger Dryas. Now, what's strange is that in layer after layer of soil built up over years, there's lots of beetles like this. Now, these flourish in cold conditions.